Hello everyone, Denise Fleck, the Pet Safety Crusader here, and spring has sprung. It was official, I believe it was at 5:58 p.m. last night, Eastern Daylight Time. So with spring comes spring cleaning and planting of the flowers and cleaning up our yards and preparing to make sure we don't have bugs and insects in the house or in the yard. I'm one of those. I'm absolute mosquito bait. They love me. So you may be grabbing things out of your cupboard, or you may be heading off to the store and bringing a lot of these chemicals into the house. First off, I'm going to tell you, please, please, please try to find items that are non-toxic, that are pet and wildlife safe. As I mentioned last week, because this is Pet Poison Week, so we are trying to cover it all. Last week we talked about inhaled poisons. Today we're going to take page, 217 out of the Pet Safety Bible to talk about absorbed poisons. And I'd like you to also notice in the back on pages 250 and 251, there are some common poisons here that you need to be aware of if you have a dog or a cat cohabitating with you. But there are just so many things, and they're all interchangeable. Last week, like I said, we talked about inhaled poisons. Well, something that's inhaled can also be in liquid or paste or some other type of form, granular, that can actually stick to the paws. Once it sticks to the paws, that means it can be absorbed into the body. It can also be ingested when a pet grooms. So, you know, a lot of these poisons, chemicals, toxins, things that we don't even consider poisonous to us humans are to our cats and dogs. And it's imperative to remember that if you have a cat, cats aren't small dogs. They're a different species. So things really affect them differently. There's a process called I know I'll never say this right, glucuronidation. And it's the way that toxins are taken into the body. And when I say toxins, it can be even medications or things that we may not initially consider poisonous, but it's the way they're taken into the body and metabolized by the liver and the kidneys and then excreted. Well, cats are what we call glucuronidation deficient. And what that means is anything they get into their body seems to be even more intense. It's like doubling up on the dose, and it takes less time for it to be problematic. So it's just so important we remember that as much as, you know, we may have both dogs and cats in our homes, they aren't the same species and things affect them differently. What may be okay for one of them may not be for another. So let's just talk a little bit about things our pets can get into and that they can actually be absorbed. Sure, for the most part, they're probably going to absorb it through their paws, but they may also absorb it through their nose because their noses are sniffing. They can absorb it through their lips, but they can absorb it through their skin on any part of their body. And a lot of us forget about this, but whether we're dog, cat, or human, the skin is actually the largest organ of the body. It really is a living, breathing organ, and it affects so much of what we do. Certainly, it's a protective covering, you know, that protects our vital organs from many things, but stuff can seep in through the skin, get into our bloodstream, and, you know, affect the various organs of the body. So it's important that we are very careful anytime anything gets on our pet's paws. Not only do we not want it absorbed through the skin, but anything that stays on the skin for long, what happens? Yeah, it gets ingested when our dogs and cats groom or lick themselves. My little buddy Haiku does his nails every night. I never have to trim his nails. It's crazy. But what that means is his feet are in his mouth. It's just one of those terrible bad habits. He doesn't have allergies or anything like that. It's just a habit he picked up as a child. And he does his nails and he gets his feet wet. So anytime he goes for a walk, I'm really concerned about that because, you know, sometimes we'll walk and he'll get slightly into a neighbor's grass or we'll get into a more public area. Granted, I know what goes on our lawn, but I don't always know what goes on another person's lawn. And, you know, that could be something that when he licks, he then ingests, and it could be dangerous. What you also have to remember is sometimes dogs will obviously walk on the street or they'll walk through the gutter. Well, that isn't safe or clean either, simply because when it rains or when people run their sprinklers, all that water runs off, and the chemicals, the fertilizers, the insecticides in the lawn then end up in the gutters and in the street. Not to mention, the rubber from the tires, the oil from the cars, and things along those lines. So if you go back to some other videos, you'll probably see that I've demonstrated, or I should say I've had Haiku demonstrate ways to protect his paws. There are walkie paws, which are kind of like leggings for dogs. It goes all the way up and covers the fur, as well as keeps those paws clean. And, a lot of people are going to say, oh, my dog's never going to wear shoes. It's all about your approach. Remember that with our animals, just like it is with any of us humans taking on something new. It's all in the attitude, all in the approach, all in the repetition. Make it fun and exciting, and it can be something that really is beneficial for your pet. But if you're not going to put something on, some sort of covering to protect those paws, do make sure you clean them off well after your walks. Obviously, if you're still in a snowy environment, I see some of you here might be where it's still cold. There could be melting salts out there. But, there could just be anything on the street. I think it's kind of becoming more and more of a habit that people leave their shoes at the front door, because there's so much we track in that we really don't want on the carpet, that we don't if we have pets or if we have children or babies crawling around, or even if us adults want to roll around on the carpet, we don't want to have, everything from the street in our carpet. So it's just so very, very true. Anytime your pet gets something in his eye, it's important to flush it out. Eye wash, which is generally purified water, is really number one. Then just other plain water would be number two, and saline number three, in that order. That's the best way to just really irrigate the eye. I know I've showed you this before, but you lift the lid and you pour from the outer corner so that that liquid dirt and debris runs down the snout or the muzzle until you get your pet to lick it out. If there's, blink it out, excuse me. Then if there's a toxin on any other part of the body, again, we'd want to flush it with large quantities of water. And when I say flush it with large quantities of water, I don't mean just, rinse it for a minute. If you really consider it a toxin, I'd rinse it for 5, 10, sometimes even 15 minutes. And I know I've told a lot of you this before about the same thing, like if you get bitten by an animal and you get out your chlorhexidine and you're cleaning out that wound. In the restaurants, they always have those little signs that you should wash your hands to the tune of happy birthday, because they think that's long enough to get the basic germs off. Well, if you have a bite or a puncture wound, again, between 5 and 15 minutes of really flushing with both the chlorhexidine and the water is necessary in order to get that saliva and the bacteria from the animal's mouth out of your wound. So think of it the same way. If they get any type of toxin, some of it's already absorbed, and we want to really, really get that out quickly. Now, if it was any type of toxin that was greasy in nature, say the dog walked through your garage and there was some oil from the car. If you just start adding water to grease, you're going to get a slimy mess. So there are two things you probably have pretty available at home: liquid dishwashing soap or shampoo, doggy specific or even your own. But work either of those two into the fur or the skin, wherever that grease is, and then start flushing it. Be gentle, because depending on what it is, some of these toxins may have actually burned the skin. So you want to make sure you aren't being super abrasive, but that you're running the water and working in either that liquid dish soap or shampoo to get rid of those greasy toxins, and flush, flush, flush. Also, there can be toxins that get absorbed or stick to the fur or the skin that are more granular in nature. You may not think of it so much as a toxin, but what if the dog goes rolling in your laundry room and you have your powdered detergent, everywhere? Well, that's soap. You certainly don't want him to ingest it. We know their sniffers are so much more attuned than ours, so that could be a problem that way as well, but they could also be absorbing it. Another granular type thing would be the Comet or all the different scrubs we use to clean out our tubs and our sinks. Still another one might be granular chlorine if you happen to have a swimming pool or a jacuzzi. So if it's powdery or granular in nature, don't immediately start, hosing it off with your spray from the sink or from an actual hose, because what you'll do is you'll actually activate that dry chemical on your pet's skin, and it'll immediately start to burn as well as be absorbed. So if it's more powdery or granular, brush it off. If you have the kind of pet that will let you get out the little dust buster or the vacuum, really try to suck it out of the fur first. And then once you've got most of it away, then once again proceed with rinsing it off with water. Just so very important that you remember these steps, and do realize that even when you act quickly, sometimes some of these toxins may cause some blistering or some redness. So be gentle with your pet's fur and skin. Treat it like a burn, because that's what a chemical would do. Obviously, it could still be getting into the system, and you may need a veterinary visit, but if you see any redness to the skin, real quickly, I know I'm kind of going off tangent here, but the quickest way to think of burns is first degree is kind of pink. Second degree, there's blisters and pus. And third degree, it's either white or black. White like that chicken breast you threw in the boiling water, or black like that steak that got burned on the grill. Second and third degree burns are very susceptible to infection. So you want to, once you've cooled them off, you want to bandage them loosely so nothing gets into them as you transport your pet to the vet. But if you're just seeing a little pink, a little tenderness, something like maybe a vitamin E gel, an aloe vera gel, something soothing like that, once you've cooled it off and removed all the toxins, can be beneficial. But I just want you to keep in mind as we get through all of the spring and summer seasons, and there's of course always toxins in the fall and winter as well. But remember, the skin is such a big part of the body. There's so much surface area that it covers where problems can be absorbed into our pet's body, and that we need to flush. We need to decontaminate that pet by rinsing away with the cleanest water source we have possible. And then possibly, if there's a little pinkness, treating it with something like aloe vera gel or vitamin E gel. Obviously, if we feel that the pet has already started to absorb some of this, we know they have already ingested or inhaled it as well, because those are two different areas we're also talking about. We may need a veterinary visit right away, especially if you're noticing any signs of tremors, seizures, weakness, vomiting, diarrhea, anything like that going on. Pyrethrin is a real concern at this time of year. It's in a lot of, it actually comes from the chrysanthemum flower, but it's what you're going to find in flea and tick control products. Anytime you see Thrin, T-H-R-I-N, and concentration should never be more than 3% when they're going on your pet. What I want to remind you about this is, we all have to do, and this is a blog that's coming in the next few weeks. I'm doing a lot of research on the latest in flea and tick controls and more homeopathic ways of doing that. So a few weeks early for me to get into that topic too much yet today. But what I do want to remind you is, again, be weight and species specific when you're applying any of these kind of medications. Don't just because you have extra of the dogs around, use it on the cat. Don't just because you have extra of the big dogs, use it on the little dog. Be very specific that you're reading directions for the proper weight and the proper species. Do not cross those over. Very, very important. And also, if you have a dog and a cat that cohabitate together, and the dog has had a flea or tick treatment of some sort, a topical, make sure the kitty doesn't lay on the dog's bed or brush against his fur for, a bit of time, so that the cat isn't absorbing what was intended for the dog. I'm just looking over here. Melissa had a question. If you have an aloe vera plant, is it safe to use the juice from that on pets? And if it's from the pets, you will find on a lot of pet poison lists, there are a lot of different parts of plants. And I think, I've touched on this before. Sometimes it'll say things like peaches or plums are poisonous, or tomatoes or potatoes to our pets. It's a certain part of the plant. Aloe vera plants have been on many pet poison lists, but it's if they chew on the leaves. If you slit open that leaf and get that gel out of it, that gel can be very beneficial. A lot of people actually feed that gel like a tablespoon a day for a larger dog in the diet because it builds up the immune system. It has healing properties. Anytime you buy aloe vera gel or juice, though, if it's not coming from a plant, and again, then you got to take it a step back. If it's a plant in your yard, what kind of insecticides or fertilizers are you putting on that plant? Could that be getting into the plant and then in turn harmful to you or the pet? But if you're growing pretty organically and you just are getting the gel, the pet's not chewing on the leaf, the aloe vera gel and juice can be very beneficial. But if you are buying it, read labels, because sometimes there will be artificial sweeteners like xylitol or other items put in there that can be harmful to the pets. So thanks, Melissa, for that great question. Hey, we've got people watching from Louisiana, from the Great Dane Group. Hey, Barbara, I know in upstate New York. Scott's here. Liz is here. It's always great to see everybody here. Sometimes I don't always give you a shout out because if you don't hit like or laugh or you don't give me a comment, I don't always know you're here. But it's wonderful to have you tune in and just be reminded. I know these little short lessons aren't, you know, all encompassing, but do remember there's always a written blog attached with more information. There is the Pet Safety Bible. I'm throwing papers around. On my website, there are classes for dogs, for cats, for birds, for rabbits, for pocket pets, for senior pets. So I'm really trying to, you know, just keep reminding you. It's kind of like advertising. They say if you see an ad, it's somewhere between the 7th and the 13th time that you actually see the ad that you remember it. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Remind people that, you know, repetition is the way we remember these things, because when something isn't right with our pet, we want to go on autopilot. We want to know what to do and not really have to look it up. And the same thing about, you know, a lot of these toxins, sometimes we do forget. So I'm just trying to be ever present in your mind and, you know, for the sake of the animals, be there. So thank you guys for tuning in. And just once again, remember that just because it's safe for us to inhale, it isn't always for our pets. We talked about that last week. Their sniffers are so much more intense. Just because it's a cream we put on our body, it may not be equally safe for our dogs or cats. There may be some ingredients, and especially when you're getting into essential oils with kitty cats, with some of our hand creams, it may not be good if it gets on their nose or on the pads of their paws and starts getting absorbed. And then even more dangerous, which we're going to talk about next week, is if they actually then groom it off their paws. So then it is ingested. But do once again remember, and the same applies to us humans, sometimes we're so concerned about the things we put in our body, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, but we also need to be concerned about what we put on our body, because whether it's a human, a dog, or a cat, the skin is the largest organ of the body, and it's going to absorb whatever we put on it, whether it be good or not so good. Goodbye to all of you, Texas, Louisiana, New York. I think we've got North Carolina, some Georgias, some South Carolinas. Great to see you all, and I'll see you next week when we talk about ingested poison. Keep your pets safe. Bye-bye for now.